But I think integration, it was, and properly, it should be termed forced integration, because I don't think either wanted it, to be honest with you. I don't think the white community wanted it, and I don't think really the black community didn't want it. But it was forced integration. And in the long-term scheme of things, I think it has been a positive. However, the black communities have suffered far more. You can go to just about any predominantly, what used to be a predominantly black area, and it's pretty much like Pleasant Hill is now. You go over to Ballard Hudson, not Ballard Hudson, but Motley Crossley.
Why is
East
that?
Macon. Because the government, city and state, I believe, did not put any resources into those areas. They have done better with the neighborhood? Yes, but you go to them. You can go to them, and you can take a look for yourself and see what those neighborhoods look like, which were in those areas were predominantly black neighborhoods back in the 50s and 60s, and go to the what used to be predominantly white neighborhoods and see the difference. And it's because the city and state did not put any resources in revitalizing those areas once they forced integration on the areas, and predominantly the schools and that sort of thing. People started moving around, that sort of thing, to because they didn't want their kids to go to school with, with black kids and stuff. So they did that. We as black people didn't have that opportunity. There were, nobody, we couldn't.
There was no busing into black neighborhoods, because
right.
it was felt
busing.
like,
It was,
they're going to just kill our kids.
Yeah. So it was rough.
And it was a one-way street.
Right.
I see.
It was a more one-way street. Everything good about a community was taken out, and everybody was sit over there. Well, okay, you can go over there and have your burger now. Mm-hmm. Okay, so because of that, then you don't need this little burger joint that you got going in Pleasant Hill anymore.
Right. Because
you can go over here.
But the other part about that, Chad, was is to dovetail what Peter just said. The busing. You may have. I'm sure you're familiar with busing.
Boston, they did in the 70s.
Busing, and but you were bused to white areas, to predominantly white schools. Now, readily, the state and the city knew that they had not put resources over here in the black community. So you didn't have the type of resources and facilities that the white community had. So they were not going to bus the white kids over here to the areas that they had not put any resources in. No, keeping the buildings up and keeping the thing up. So they knew that. So what they did, they took the busing and they bring buses over here, and you had to load the bus and go over to the white predominant schools. Now, I can tell you asked me a little bit earlier about my personal experiences. And I will tell you one. Now, personally, like I said, I graduated high school here in Macon in 1970. And thus, I was never bused. I walked to school. I was in the neighborhood, so I walked to Ballard Hudson, back and forth every day. Never took a bus. However, what ended up happening right after I graduated, that very same year, I graduated in June of 1970 from high school. Right after that next fall, couple of months after June, that next fall, and people were starting to get bused. But prior to me graduating in 1970, in 68, 69, when I was in high school, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, we never had new books. Never. I never had a new book. Our books, and like I said, which is why the busing, they did it. our books that we got from the city and the state were always hand-me-down books from the predominantly white schools. We would get their old books, old edition. We get edition 2, while they were getting edition 3 and 4 and 5. So what ended up happening, so when we get a book, math, science book, it might have pages torn out of it or whatever, that sort of thing. So, my personal experience was, I can tell you specifically, we never had new books, never. We had old algebra books, old, math, science. We had the old, and they would always come from the predominantly white schools. They would get the new books. We didn't. So when the busing started, they were not about to bus the white kids over in the black neighborhoods. They took and bused the black kids over to the whites, and that hurt areas like Pleasant Hill, because now all of the resources and stuff were being shipped out. Okay, and so that was probably when the predominantly black neighborhoods began to decline because of it, and because all of a sudden now the kids are out there, and the businesses, started to decline a little bit, or started to move and that sort of thing. But it was so when I went off to college from here, would be coming back and forth from college and that sort of thing, you could see it. And but
it happened that fast, huh?
It was
that
it was
fast.
devastating.
Huh.
It was devastating.
It was that fast.
It was devastating. And so the neighborhoods that you see now are the result of it. Now, overall, is it the sole reason for the decline of Pleasant Hill and other areas here in Macon? It's not the sole reason, but it didn't help. Now, what if sitting where I sit now and looking at things, would I recommend it? Yeah, because in the long term, it had some effect. What more so hurt Macon was a lot of the bigger businesses moving out. You had your Brown and Williamsons and all these other large companies that eventually relocated someplace else. That had more effect, but it didn't help.
What do you remember about growing up on Roosevelt? What kind of house did you live in? Did you have brothers and sisters?
Big old wooden house. Wood fireplaces and things like that. Playing with my cousins and everybody, and it was his grandmama's house. So the grandkids all congregated there. Okay, and so we would all be, we'd be going back and forth over there during the year. But when the summer came, it was, hey, I want to go to grandmama's house. And so all the cousins there, and you always got treated good. You didn't have to worry about too much getting your butt beat or spanked, because grandmama was
Right.
always cooking and taking good care of the grandkids. So so.
Where were your parents?
They were, my dad, Henry Nash, was at that point, was on the road. He was a singer,
Okay.
entertainer. Over the, Little Richard and all of them were here, and other artists were here, and they went to school together. They played in the bands together, and as they grew up, they, was singing together. My dad had a little group called, I think it was the Dominions or the Dominoes or something like that. Anyway, his little group, and then so he had a little band, and so Little Richard and all of them eventually employed my dad's band, which was called the Upsetters at that point. And so they went all on the road and all this sort of stuff. So when you ask about where my parents, my mom was working, you know, as a domestic, and my dad was around in Georgia and everything, you know, playing at the little clubs and this sort of thing, and doing that. So I would be over to my grandmom's house and everything, and so I'd spend the days over there. A lot of times she'd come pick me up, and sometimes I'd just stay all night, you know, day after day, especially if it was summer. But if it was during the school year, you know, I'd make it over there and after school or something like that. So.
Did they travel? Does your dad's band travel all around the country?
Yes.
Do you think it was called the Dominoes or the Dominions?
I can find the name for you, but it was.
The reason I'm asking is because I heard some reference. I've got some recordings of Elvis at Sun Studios, and he references he saw an act in Las Vegas called Ward and His Dominoes, and it blew him away. And I was wondering if maybe that was possibly your dad's band.
I can get the specific name for you, and I can get that to Peter, and Peter can get it to you directly. So, but it was he sung with that group, and then he eventually what became the Little Richard's road manager for a number of years. So.
And did he play? Was Little Richard from the very beginning here in Pleasant Hill at all, or did they know each other?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All of them was in school together. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right here.
Yeah, because Richard was with the Bella Hudson too.
Right.
Yeah, so they all knew each other. And as a matter of fact, my oldest brother heard Richard tell the principal, R.J. Martin, Dr. Martin, that he wasn't worried about graduating from Ballard Hudson because he was going to New York to become famous. And this was while he was at Ballard Hudson.
Yeah.
So,
do you remember where his house was? I know his boyhood home, I think, was on 5th Avenue and Middle Street, but then I've heard also that his family moved across the street to another street later on. Do you remember?
I don't.
And then I've also heard that they used to practice in the front living room, and people from the community would come out and sit in the yard and listen to them.
Yeah, I don't know what street that was on.
Okay.
but Richard, that was in his book.
Right. Right.
See, they were over on 2 blocks over. Woodliff, because that was where Richard's father had that little club.
Yeah.
On Woodliff Street. It was all right in that same area that the house is now.
It was across the creek.
Yeah.
It's on a little. From what I understand, it's on a little hill. It looks like almost.
That's Woodliff Street because it's up higher.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's there was a lot of stuff going on then because of the way the community was set up, and you had access to the full community without I-75 being in there, and so
you could walk.
Was that where the culvert is now that cuts through 5th Avenue? Was that a natural creek when you were kids, or was that always
that was
cemented?
there was always springs flowing through Pleasant Hill. One down here, at 1 block away, that's been covered over. Running, remember alongside.
Did you guys play in those?
Oh yeah. Put little race sticks.
Yeah.
You know.
I did the same thing.
You did. Put a little stick.
Crayfish.
And race them down the creek. Yeah.
Right.
So the water was never high enough to drown you unless you stick your face down in it or something. But it was always up around your ankles or something like that.
I was thinking it'd be really kind of neat. I don't know how practical it is, but to restore that kind of natural creek flow rather than have like a concrete culvert.
Probably not. Not now. But it was fun for the kids, and plus, you don't have as many kids in the area now as you used to.
Mm-hmm.
But back in those times, it was plenty of kids around, and and people were walking back and forth, and so the little creek down there, kids, they find anything to play, to have some fun, and so what we would do is, like we said, get a little twig or a little stick and and put it out there because you could walk behind, the creek might have been ankle deep, so you could walk behind it and you watch your stick outrace the other guy's stick, So it was that, so it was always.
Did you go outside Pleasant Hill much as a kid for entertainment or adventure?
No, only if I was with my parents. As far as wandering as a kid on our own, no, we basically stayed in our community. As for now, when I was coming along as a teenager, would catch the city bus and maybe go downtown or something, because at that time you had all your stores at that point, basically for clothing and, that shoes and stuff. Matter of fact, my dad at one point worked, I'm not sure what the street name was, but worked at a store down there as a teenager, worked at a store down there called Butler.
Scroll through that.
Called Butler Shoe Store.
Those are all of his relatives.
Oh, okay.
Everybody that you're looking at.
Who's that? Let me see. Oh, this is at the family reunion. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And was that here in Pleasant Hill?
That was here in Macon.
It was in Macon.
Yeah. But that was a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was a couple of years ago.
I'm going to get.
Matter of fact, they had a collage of pictures and stuff.
Yeah, I took pictures. That's his father's sister. That's his aunt. Right there. It's Catherine.
Yeah. Because they had a picture of Dad.
Yeah, and I got that. I took.
Okay, but anyway, that was at a family reunion a few years ago. Matter of fact, we're having it again this June, but it's in St. Paul.
Did you St. Paul, Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Did you guys have a movie theater here in Pleasant Hill?
The movie theater that we used to go to was Douglas Theater downtown, and it was predominantly black.
Okay.
Movie theater. That's the only one we were able to go to at that time.
Henry Nash.
Oh, okay. Now, did your dad play music at home? Like, were you around the music, or was he always on the road that you weren't around the music very much?
No, he played a little. He played a little, but he was primarily singing. Now, matter of fact, for a gift when I was 10 or 11 or 12, he gave me a saxophone and wanted me to learn how to play a saxophone. So, as a matter of fact, I still got the saxophone. I still have it. That he gave me when I was 12, 15, something like that. But yeah, but that's him.
He loved Macon.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He loved Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
When I moved to New York, I would always see. He had started his own business.
Yeah.
At that time, but prior to that, wasn't he with Queen's Booking?
Yeah, it was the largest African American owned business booking agency in the country at that point. He was vice president at that point, and I went and stayed up there a summer. Spent a couple of summers up there working up there with him down there. It was right at I was on Broadway, 1690.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
1690 Broadway in New York City.
In Times Square.
Right.
His office was inside Times Square.
Right.
You can imagine that was the most expensive piece of real estate anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere inside Times Square, and
In fact, you probably could at some point, Chad. You could probably Google it.
Yeah.
Queen's Booking Corporation, QBC. It was owned by a lady by the name of Ruth Bowen. She was the president. Dad was the vice president, and it became the largest. Probably in the top 5 or 6 in the country at that point, next to William Morris. You may
William
have heard
Morris.
of William Morris Agency.
When was this? What
This
years
was
were
in
these?
this was in the '60s that I
Okay.
know of.
Yeah.
That I know of.
It
That was
was
before that.
Also the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were big. These were the agencies that you had if you wanted an act to perform somewhere, anywhere in the country.
Or internationally
right.
too, because they did international too.
You'd have to call them and say, "Well, I want so and so. I want Ray Goodman and Brown. I want the Supremes. I want the Dells. To perform such and such a place. You have to call them."
During that time, matter of fact, if Prince, who I think just had performed in Atlanta, you probably back in that day, if Prince had been back in those days,
Yes.
these are the guys.
They
you
would
have
be.
had to
They
call.
would have
So
been.
would they have contracts with the performers, or did they just represent everybody?
They would represent. If you wanted their representation, because you had a choice to either go to them or you could go to William Morris Agency or somebody like that. So, but if you, a Prince or a James Brown, or matter of fact, James Brown was part of their package.
Yeah.
Aretha Franklin was part of that package. Matter of fact, Ruth Bowen represented Aretha personally for years. And matter of fact, that lives in Atlanta now is an entertainer by the name of Millie Jackson. You may or may not know Millie Jackson, but anyway, she was quite a star. And so when she had got her first gold record, one of her first gold records, she also gave Dad one a gold record. Had him one made as well because he had been such a good agent representing her and everything that. And matter of fact, I still have. Matter of fact, it's down here at what's that first storage place down on 2nd Street here. I got it stored down. They gave him also a mink coat, a long mink coat that she presented him for. And so I when he passed away, I got that.
That gold record.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind. If I could get a photo of that, that we could, we could have, on display in the resource house, things like that. Those are things that we want to show because we want to show who your dad was and what he was to play. It wasn't just that he left Pleasant Hill and went off and made some money.
Mm-hmm.
It was about Pleasant Hill. It was the Pleasant Hill that he had in him that he spread all over the world because he traveled everywhere. And everywhere he went,
that is true.
He was going to find somebody that he could talk to about Macon and Pleasant Hill.
That is true. Because I really don't know of any, over the years, I don't know of any country that he did not go to simply because he was ran these companies, the company that he started, and he represented a lot of different performers and entertainers and that sort of thing. So as their representative, he would travel to these different places where he had booked them to perform. And so on all over the world, be it Europe, Asia, Africa, so he did that. So and he never really left his roots, if you will. Never, and he was always proud of Pleasant Hill, where he grew up, because I guess he was nurtured.
Did he come back here when he retired from the business?
He actually never retired. Actually, he started his own company. When he passed away, he was still in New York. Yeah. Still in New York, about 2 blocks off of Broadway at that point.
Was he with Queens then?
No, he was running his own.
Sabrina.
He ran a company called Sabrina. Okay. He started it and incorporated it, and it did some of the same things that Queen Booking did. So
Okay.
That was all his.
That was his.
Sabrina Artist
Corporation.
Corporation.
Right. That was his, Sabrina.
And where did he get that name from?
He got that name from two women friends that he had up there. There was actually two. One was named Suzanne, and one was named Brenda.
Okay.
So he combined the two names, SU for Suzanne, BRENA, for
Okay.
So that's actually how Sabrina got his name.
All right. Because you know what? That was.
He and my mom had divorced at that time.
I never got a chance to ask him where he got that
Is this
name.
still a company still around?
No, when he passed away, I at that point dissolved it and moved because he was living there on
58th?
57th
56th
Street.
Yeah, 56th.
West 56.
Right.
Yeah, 330 West 56, apartment 18M.
Right. Yeah.
And what you went to college after high school, and did you ever imagine yourself staying in Pleasant Hill, or did everybody, including yourself, think that I would be somewhere else?
Well, I actually, Chad, what I did. My dad sent me to school. I was one of the few guys that I remember being down there that didn't have student loans and things. So he paid the whole thing. But what he did, he gave me a list of all the schools, any school you want to go to. So I ended up picking Savannah State College and went down to Savannah in engineering. And he was really rough about that. It's like he started, and so he was paying my tuition, and 4 years later, he was like, "Well, when is graduation?" He's playing, stuff like that. So whether I was, so I ended up graduating, because I didn't want to, couldn't disappoint him. So, but did I ever? I actually, Chad, gave it a situation wherever I could find a job. Now, and at that time, he was still in business and running his company, Sabrina. And so I sort of, did I want to go to New York and work for my dad or whatever? And he actually said, no, what I want you to do, I want you to get your start in engineering. You've gotten your degree, so go and do that for a while. And so that's what I did, and I ended up getting job offers in Philadelphia and the Washington, D.C. area. I couldn't find a job in the state of Georgia, so I ended up picking the job which was closest to Georgia, really, which was in D.C., Washington, D.C. area, and that's where I've been for 42 years now.
Do you have any immediate family members that never left Pleasant Hill that are still here in the community?
No Nashes. Got cousins. That's still here.
Okay.
I think she's still here. But no Nashes.
When you were a kid or when you were in high school, do you remember, was there much public music stuff going on? Were there people playing in houses or on the streets, or did you see famous musicians walking around? What was
I wouldn't know about the famous ones because I was small. I was small at the time, but music was very prevalent. They had little night spots, I guess you might call them, Pete. I don't know, that people could go to and be entertained, or they could go. What they had, Chad, at that point was they used to thing is called, they were Bloodstones. They were here?
The Flintstones.
Right,
Flintstones. Flintstones. They were from on the hill there, just up the street from you.
Okay, up on the top, right up Roosevelt.
Right up Roosevelt.
Yeah,
they all came out of there, and that was a local band that was playing during because we're not that far apart in age,
right.
And they were playing during that time, right about the time that we were going into high school. And that was well-known. It became very well-known in the area. They never went national,
right.
but they were known throughout Georgia and Alabama and the Southern Circuit. Right. They were well known.
And one of the things too, Chad, that you may or may not be familiar with, but you might be able to Google it at some point. There was a artists like that would entertainers that would come out of areas like Pleasant Hill and other areas. There was a series of little clubs around the state of Georgia. They used to call it the Chitlin Circuit. You ever heard of that? Well, that's what they used to call it.
That's right.
And they used to call it the Chitlin Circuit. So it was these series of night spots where people could go and singers would be there, bands playing, sort of stuff. You could buy a ticket and go in. And so Dad and Little Richard and all of them, Otis Redding and all of them, would play these different clubs and different nights, kind of rotating around and that sort of stuff, and make a little money, and so they didn't so much have them here in Pleasant Hill, but what they did have was these little chitlin circuits, and some of them might be around the periphery of Atlanta, Augusta, Savannah, all the little areas and communities around the state of Georgia,
towns
right?
Too, because they made a lot of trips to these smaller towns because people were dying to see them. And they could make money in the small town.
I mean, they were, that's where they met. It was Little Richard, Dad, and all of them. Like I said, Dad's band was backing him up at that point.
Right.
And they ran into, James Brown was playing on the Chitlin Circuit. He was coming out of Augusta and all that stuff. And Macon, so he kind of adopted Macon because so much was going on here at that time. Macon is centrally located statewide. And so if you had a semi-base here in the Macon area, and by Pleasant Hill being a predominant little area, so you would kind of navigate over this way, And so they ran into Otis Redding and all of them around here.
And that was before Atlanta, because Atlanta was not what we know it to be today. Atlanta only became that really in the late 60s going into the 70s. Before then, it was Macon was considered the big city
because it was centrally located, and so many of the artists was coming out of here.
That's right.
When you had James Brown wanted to make, kind of making somewhat of his semi-base out of Macon. He would call it the Big M.
Big M.
He would call Macon the
and
Big M.
And then you had Clint Brantley, who lived right down the street, who was the guy that was booking everybody in statewide.
It was an interesting dynamic, and I think it was forced upon Pleasant Hill because it started up first, and it just grew, and so many prominent people ended up being and living over here and working out of here. If you got your doctor, he's over here. You got your pharmacist and all these other places and that over here. So a lot of people was just over here, and so it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And you had authors, teachers, entertainers, all these kinds of people were coming out.
Was there any separation or distinction between members of Pleasant Hill who went to St. Peter Claver, the Catholic Church, versus members who went to a Protestant church? Was there, in Ireland, you have a real distinct community. You have the Protestant and Catholic communities. Anything existed like that in Pleasant Hill?
Not that I'm aware of. I think Chad and Moore, I think it was no distinctions between it. I think maybe it was just maybe a personal preference of yours at the time. If your parent was a teacher or a doctor, they may have sent you to St. Peter Claver. Maybe they had the extra money to do it, because it might cost a little more to go to, the private schools and things of that nature. My dad and the family, they didn't have that money, so they went to the public schools. Okay, so but there was no distinction between them. Everybody was everybody. Everybody, if you had a brand new car, And my family had an old car, no big deal. You know, because as you pointed out, there was no real distinction between the people, because you may stay right next door to a person, your friend, you know, may go to a private school, you may go to the public school, your friend's family may be able to afford a little bit more but as far as people getting along and distinctions, was no big deal. Your family may have a little bit more financial resources. They didn't live in no enclave of big houses and stuff like that. Everybody lived amongst each other. So everybody was friends with everybody, and there was no distinction, there was no separation there was no caste system, if you will. Everybody just lived right here together, no matter what your economic or educational level might be. So everybody was.
Why do you think that was? Is it the sheer fact it's just a small geographic area, or is it just self-preservation as a community that was segregated? Because even, you know, I don't think you really have that much anymore in communities that
I don't know whether. Go ahead, Peter.
I want you but the only thing that I've ever seen was that there was a mutual thought, and the mutual thought was about the children.
Mm-hmm.
When you get consumed with caring for the children, you don't have time to be upset with your neighbor about some penny ante, whatever, because I love the children, he loves the children,
mm-hmm.
So our focus is to do the best that we can for those children, and this happened generation after generation after generation. And so as you grew up, you saw this thing happening, so it became part of you. So it just proliferated, because each generation picked up, this was a good thing that my parents did, so I'm supposed to follow suit.
And it was such mutual respect for everybody in the community, because by you being over here in this area, most everybody knew everybody. Most families knew families, mm-hmm. Kids knew kids. You might stay on this side of Pleasant Hill, somebody else may stay on the other side of Pleasant Hill, but because everybody going to the schools and playgrounds and everything, everybody knew each other. Okay, I mean, even when when my dad passed away, 2001, the respect and everything. I mean, entertainers came to his funeral here, because I buried him here in Macon. Little Richard came to the funeral. I got condolences and cards and everything from the B.B. Kings and Ben E. King,
Ruth Brown,
right? All of them. Millie Jackson's. I got condolences from all these people who knew him. Okay, and so some came they wanted to, which they did, have a memorial for him up at the church there in Manhattan, in New York. Yeah. Okay, so we had a memorial for him in New York. Okay, and all of them came and signed the book and stuff. If I can find that, been about 15 years ago now. But anyway, so they had respect for each other. People that were here in the area, or just who knew him and that he had worked with. And give you an example of people how tight the community was. How tight the community was. This is just one example that I can tell you from personal experience of how tight the community of Pleasant Hill was. Little Richard and others and my father and all of them all grew up here in this community. My uncle, Jesse Nash, who was also grew up here. My dad's younger brother. There was 8 of them. But anyway, he came right after my dad. So all of them knew each other. Little Richard and all of them played and went to school together and everything. When my uncle died, my Uncle Jesse died in Los Angeles. Okay? And when my dad, who was in New York at the time, I personally happened to be on business out in San Diego, south of Los Angeles at the time, when I got notified that my dad finally reached me out there and said, where are you, blah, blah. I said, well, your Uncle Jesse passed away, blah, 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 and he's up in Los Angeles. So at the time, Los Angeles, and they may still do, you get 72 hours for somebody to claim your body. And I think it was like the 48th, 60th hour, something like that they found me out there on business. What Dad did in order to get my uncle claimed so that they don't do away with the body. You know who claimed him? Got him out of the morgue and got him claimed so that they would not do away with the body was Little Richard. That's how close the community is. Mm-hmm. That's how close the community is. And so what Little Richard did for somebody that he knew in Pleasant Hill, boyhood friends, he went, claimed body. So by the time I could get from San Diego up to Los Angeles to make arrangements to have my uncle body sent to Macon, he had already done that. So I had to go and get him and have his body sent and everything. But because of just boyhood friends here in this little area called Pleasant Hill, that's you know what? That's how tight and close knit this neighborhood was. Now,
and you never think about it. You never think about it. Just like he drop a hat on the floor and I reach over and pick it up for it.
That's a friend. And so my dad, called little Richard out there and said, hey, look, my brother Jesse's out there and blah, blah, blah. And we need to do, and that's the thing. Now, Dad paid him back, but he didn't have to ask him to do it. He went and did it on his own. Said, "Hey, look, I'll make arrangements." This is what we're talking about as far as how this community bonded together from not only from childhood friends, but we're talking about grown men at that point, and so it was. The neighborhood was unique in that respect, and I think it was. I don't know whether it was unity for preservation, or, but I think it's because this neighborhood was different and unique in its development and how it got developed, and just so happened the types of people that was here at the time. Now you probably couldn't get that today, but during that era, it was a different feel about things. As a kid, I didn't have a problem. Me and a couple cousins walking from here to there. You probably can't do that in many neighborhoods now without some fear. But as a little kid, you didn't worry about nobody snatching me or kidnapping me or finding me in a ditch with my throat slit, stuff like that. It was just a different kind of neighborhood, and I'm very happy to say that I, had a chance to be over here and to grow up in this neighborhood.
I'm sorry.
One more question I was thinking of I wanted to ask was, what was the relationship between Clint Brandley and your dad? Now they're both in the music business, and they did from what I understand, they did a similar type of business. Did they have any connection, or
they had a connection? They worked together, more of a friendly rivalry, if you will, from what my memory of it was that they were somewhat in the same business, but my dad somewhat ran an overall agency, booking agency. He was vice president of one of the largest ones ever, and then he started his own in Sabrina Artists. Brantley mostly kind of managed stars, entertainers and that sort of thing. Dad was more in the booking side of things and did some managing, but his was primarily doing some managing of some specific artists, not just anybody, but some specific ones, and then booked as many as he possibly could. But Brantley mostly, from what my memory of it, was primarily in the management of those artists.
And when your dad was running the business and working that business, did he also perform that time as well, or was that in just his younger years?
That was his youngest years as a performer.
Okay. And what instruments did he play?
Sax.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And he sang as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there anything else you can think of you'd like to talk about? We covered a lot of ground, I think. I don't want to keep you too much longer.
Well,
I didn't want to miss anything if you thought we should talk about it.
Well, I think we covered most of it. I think if there's anything that I would say and highlight was he was very, very proud of the area, Macon in general. And always had told me specifically that he wanted to retire back to Macon, and if anything ever happened to him, that he wanted to be buried in Georgia soil, no matter where he was, And so when he passed away in New York, it was never a question about where his final resting place would be. And my job at that point was to make sure that his wishes were fulfilled, and which was to go and get him and bring him back to where he wanted to be, which was in Macon, and everything. He just loved Macon. I think he loved, like I said, the community was one where it nurtured him. It got his start here. He met some people here that helped shape his life. The entertainment part of him was started here. He met the Brantleys, the Little Richards, and the James Browns, and all these other people that were coming along, and all of them about the same age at that time, And so I think because of the influences that Macon and Pleasant Hill had upon him, his life, his career, that's the things that and he was, nationally in the entertainment business known. I mean, as far as being the agent for the Isley brothers and a bunch of other people, and like I say, when he passed away, and I got condolences and cards and everything from a lot of different people. Some of them knew me and some of them didn't. But they found out that, hey, look, his son is handling, arrangements and everything, and this is how you can reach him. So I got, some of the cards were sent to me directly, and some of them were sent back to Dad's address, which they figured I would eventually get the card.
Right. Right.
And so I was notified. So I think Pleasant Hill was very, very instrumental in his life, personally and professionally. So that's the only thing I would add.
Okay. Peter, did you have anything else you wanted to add or ask Mr. Nash?
Peter, you probably can expound on this a little bit. Because of the neighborhood of Pleasant Hill, Now, my dad was older, obviously much older than Peter. But because Peter was here in Pleasant Hill, and my dad ran with his older brothers, Pete's older brothers, when little Peter, young guy that they never really hung with him because he was older, when he found out that Pete was in New York for whatever reason to come up there, it was like, hey man, come on and hang with, I didn't hang with you as a kid because you're a little bitty guy in diapers or something. So, but come on over and let's go and hang. This is how the community was.
That was what he was supposed to do because I was from Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
Not just because he knew my brothers and they were good friends. Even if he had not known, if he found out that I was from Macon, first of all, okay, it would have been said, come on over here. But then Pleasant Hill on top of that, it was over.
I live in Washington, D.C., in a little community right outside of Washington, D.C. called Silver Spring, Maryland.
My best friend lives there.
Really?
He lives on Old Columbia Turnpike.
Right. Right. Well, tell him, you tell your old friend that I'm right off of 29, Route 29, which is Columbia Park. Tell him right off of it.
Okay.
Okay, Route 29, Colesville Road. He'll know. But anyway, back in the 80s, back in the early 80s, I guess it was. Now, Peter was over here running around, and I was down over Roosevelt running around. Now, after he had gone to New York, been up there messing around, doing whatever he was doing up there as a job or whatever, he and my dad got together one weekend. They show up, they have driven from New York City down to Silver Spring, Maryland, and come up there ringing my doorbell. Ding dong, ding dong. So I come to the door, and there's my dad standing there. Hey, Dad. My dad. You remember him, don't you? I look.
No.
This Peter Givens. Over there, all us over there in Pleasant Hill together. I said, no. but this is how it was. And so come on in, guys, and this was 84.
Oh, so you guys didn't know each other when you grew up here?
You know what? No, because even, let me tell you how close it was. All right? 70, 71. We were at Savannah State
at the same
for
time.
for 2 years.
Never crossed.
Did not know. Okay?
Right.
For 2 years. Because now he's a freshman, I'm a junior. Right?
Yeah.
He's a freshman, I'm a junior. I didn't, if I had no idea. If I had known Henry Nash's son was there, of course, but neither one of us knew.
Know some of the same professors.
Had to, because we were both in engineering.
Right. But his class, by him being in junior, senior classes, taking junior, senior class, I'm taking freshman courses.
Yeah,
he's
tech science
right.
building all the time. Right. That was it.
Labs and everything, but just even if I saw him, I may or may not have recognized him. Because like I said, we was over here running around as small kids, and so but we were about 3 years apart. So it was that sort of. It was. I'm just saying of how tight the community was and how friendly everybody was, and the neighborhood was just a different type of thing at the time, and that's why they would do things for people, for each other. If even my mother and everything may not have known Pete because he was so small, but she may have known his mother and his daddy.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
She would know
the everywhere, and but that's what transpired here, and so the highway, the tearing up chopping it up and so forth. Cemeteries got affected, churches got affected, families got affected, the whole way of life got affected. And that's why I think people like Peter Givens and all of them, you know, recognize and say, hey, look, this is not just some place to just run through. You have affected a culture of life here in this community called Pleasant Hill. So you don't see that every day.
Mm-hmm.
What I've, you know, we've told you, such as, you know, one of my uncles in Los Angeles, because of their relationship, saved him and brought so we could get him and bring him back. And then when the other brother, older brother, who was out there, and his body, and they buried him in San Diego, you know, and taking the friends out there, you don't see that every day, you know. And so it was that type of community. And so the highway, the tearing up, chopping it up, and so forth. Cemeteries got affected, churches got affected, families got affected, the whole way of life got affected. And that's why I think people like Peter Givens and all of them, you know, recognize and say, hey, look, this is not just some place to just run through. You have affected a culture of life here in this community called Pleasant Hill. So you don't see that every day. Mm-hmm. What I've, you know, we've told you, such as, you know, one of my uncles in Los Angeles, because of their relationship, saved him and brought so we could get him and bring him back. And then when the other brother, older brother, who was out there, and his body, and they buried him in San Diego, you know, and taking the friends out there, you don't see that every day. You know, and so it was that type of community.